Now, 27 years after he first busted out of the garage and onto the Australian music scene, Mark Lizotte, better known as Diesel, is back with his 15th career album.
There it is there. It's called Americana. That beautiful black and white photograph has a story, which we'll get to. Americana draws on the music of his childhood with country, folk, bluegrass, R&B, lots of blues influences. And we're delighted to say that Diesel joins us in the studio. Good morning. Welcome to News Breakfast.
Thanks for having me.
Give us a look at that beautiful record. Look at that one. And I think you should tell us straight away about this absolutely lovely cover. We can maybe bring it up on the screen so people can see it at home. Tell us about the story about that photograph.
Yeah, I just came out of the meeting actually when we discussed making this record, which was a total surprise to me, as I was going to start working on an album of my own material. But when someone puts a list in front of you of artists, you know, like Neil Young and Johnny Cash, Springsteen, Tom Petty. That's probably one of my favourite tracks on there, actually, the Tom Petty track. I just couldn't say no. So I walked out of the meeting feeling very excited. Then my brother started texting me these photos because he was down in Tasmania looking through my dad's stuff and the wedding album that I'd seen, you know, like obviously before, but it had been a very long time. And he was sending me these photos of that photo in particular. And I thought, well, this is great. You know, perfect timing. I've got the cover of the album now. Yeah. It started making a lot more sense when I had the cover.
Because it's your mum and dad.
Yeah, and that was on their wedding day. It's a borrowed car. There's another shot of it where you can see the back and it's got like a Red Cross kind of thing. It was like a Navy medical car or something.
Right.
Used for the hospital. And they look like, you know, miniaturized people next to the car. It is a big car, but they were quite tiny, my mum and dad. And that's their clothes that they're like, you know, they're going off for their little weekend or whatever, their honeymoon. And it's quite, it's, you know, it says a lot, I think.
It's really
it's a fantastic.
I just thought that is Americana right there.
I can see the resemblance.
Yeah.
With your dad. Hey, what was the reasoning behind this album? You know, great artists from the past, Johnny Cash, Buddy Holly and the like.
I just thought, you know, I mean, I haven't really told the story of, it actually has the song that is literally the first song I can remember, besides a few jazz things that my dad was spinning when I was like 2 or 3 years old. And my sister, I found out, she sent me an email the other day saying I was the one playing that song all the time in the house. I was obsessed with that song. It's a Joni Mitchell song called Circle Game, and she learned it on the guitar. So I remember sort of sitting in the bathtub, you know, singing it to my sister and telling her it was my song. So, you know, early plagiarism, no doubt. But yeah, so from there, right through to my, you know, teenage years, you know, living in a shared house with that Tom Petty record and always putting the needle on that one song that I was obsessed with, which was Here Comes My Girl. And then I'd listen to the rest of the album. So I didn't plan it, but it turned out to be kind of like an autobiographical kind of story of my musical heritage sort of thing. And I guess moving back and forth from Australia to America, as my mum and dad would take us back and forth, I'm not sure I would have such a fascination for Americana if I hadn't, you know, come over here to start with, for instance. So it's kind of that whole like grass is greener when I was in America, I was sort of like missing all the Australian music and vice versa. So.
It's interesting that we noted this morning that you're releasing your 15th album. It's been a long and terrific career for you. Is it a big adjustment to go from being, you know, and you were, you know, in the 80s, a huge, you know, idol of younger women in particular, a real kind of pop star. Is it hard to get your footing to make sure that your career has the longevity and the strength that you want?
Yeah, look, I came out of playing in pubs I started playing in pubs when I was 15. So that thing that happened, you know, when we made it across the Nullarbor, we made a record, went to Memphis. I don't think any of us at that time kind of knew it was going to explode into that, but it was the biggest debut by an Australian artist at that time ever. So it was a huge debut album.
Yep.
So big impact, but I guess once the kind of, you know, the echoes had sort of, you know, dissipated and you're left with like, okay, well, what do I do? You know, you get on with it. And for me, it was just playing live and making records. And I think playing live even more so because, you know, it's the most tangible thing for any musician to just get out there and, you know, when people do this and say, I just saw blah, blah, blah last night. Oh, you missed it. That's the best kind of most tangible thing any artist could take. And I think once the hype is gone, that's what you're left with. And so you either pick up that and make something other. And if you're not, I hate to say it, but if you're not very good live, you're probably not going to survive.
Yep.
That's the long and short of it.
And it still continues these days, and these days of reality music shows as well. You make a very good point. Did you feel self-conscious at all trying to cover people like Bruce Springsteen?
Look, I'd be lying if I didn't say I wasn't aware of the fact that the knives would be out. But I thought, I did a bit of research and I realised there'd been so few versions of that song, and I thought, well, why? Are people scared of it, or is it? I don't know. Maybe it's just been a long time, and people have
Born
just
to Run, which you covered fantastically.
So I thought, it's just a great song. Why can't somebody do it? I thought my whole intention with that was to try to make it fit into a singular, so like totally guitar based. And I thought, well, if The Edge, for instance, from U2 was, were to take that song and do all these textural things that he can do with it, he could probably make it sound, really big and orchestral. Because there is a lot of things on that record. There almost is. Well, there's bells, maybe not whistles, but there's definitely bells.
The American tradition has been, mined and reworked so beautifully and creatively by musicians like yourself and so many others in the last few years. I've just been wondering whether it's time for us to do something similar with the Australian music tradition.
Absolutely. This might be volume 2, if not for me, for someone else. I think there's a really rich. I think Australian music, I personally describe it as a real hybrid. It's a lot like our animals and flora and fauna and everything. It's kind of left to its own devices. It's mutated into something quite unique.
That's a nice
point. Growing up, I remember sort of being able to look and see what was happening in the UK and America and Europe and anywhere else for that matter. And by the time it sort of came down here, it would do this mutation thing, and we were less inclined to sort of be really true to the movement or whatever. And so it's not like we didn't follow what was happening globally, and we're still like that. We still very much kind of do our own thing, and maybe it's the tyranny of distance, I don't know, but...
Well, having seen Cry and Shame covered so many times by pub bands right around the country, Diesel, your music lives on in so many forms.
That's a big part of the tradition.
Yeah.
And we're delighted to actually see, look at that, an actually LP format.
Yeah.
How beautiful is that?
It is good. I mean, it does sound... I think, the big lie about CDs sounding better was a big lie, really. They're great for portability, but...
Diesel, really nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us on Your Breakfast. Thank you. Go well.
Cheers.
Thanks, Diesel. Cheers, mate.